morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines this morning. It's a mixed start to trade in Asia as investors weigh in on subdued earnings from Wall Street and Japan. Jet Airways lenders hold back from transferring 1,500 crore rupees as bankers fear prosecution similar to what followed Kingfisher Airlines collapse. Dr. Reddy's will be in focus today after the company's Bachupalli unit got an establishment inspection report from the US FDA. Wipro will be reporting its fourth quarter results today. The company will also consider a share buyback proposal at its board meet that happens today. And a massive fire has ravaged the iconic Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, in France. No casualties have been reported in the incident, though. Let's talk about the U.S. markets first. It was a subdued start to the week for the U.S. markets. Benchmark indices ended with marginal losses led by below-par earnings from Goldman Sachs and Citigroup. Weakness in shares of Boeing also dragged the Dow Jones lower. Renita Young of Bloomberg News tells you exactly what happened in that session in this report.
U.S. markets are slipping as major bank earnings results disappoint. The S&P 500 sliding below that key 2,900 level yet again, snapping a three-day winning streak as the financial sector led those declines in the S&P 500. Meanwhile, Waste Management shares soaring after the company announced it will soon purchase Advanced Disposal for $2.9 billion. Shares of Spotify, however, dropped to the lowest in 2 months after reports that Amazon will soon launch its own music streaming service. Bank shares right down there with Spotify at the very start of corporate earnings season. Goldman Sachs sliding, missing analyst estimates for sales and trading revenue as Citigroup steadies after meeting analyst expectations. Up next, we do have Bank of America, American Express, Morgan Stanley, and BlackRock. Meanwhile, oil drops. The yield on 10-year U.S. Treasuries fell a little bit, and the Bloomberg Dollar Index is rising. And central banks are back in the news as U.S. President Donald Trump renews his attack on the U.S. Federal Reserve, saying the stock market would be, quote, 5,000 to 10,000 points higher had it not been for the responsibilities, or rather the actions, of U.S. policymakers. And that's a look at your Monday Wall Street action. In New York, I'm Renita Young for Bloomberg News.
All right, well, that's how the U.S. markets look. To have a look at what the Asian markets are doing right now, I'm joined by Sophie Kamruddin, who's joining us live from the studios in Hong Kong. Morning, Sophie. How are we looking at trade today? We in India, in particular, are going into a midweek holiday tomorrow. So we're just trying to figure out how to go into the midweek holiday.
Well, no holiday for the rest of Asia just yet, but it looks like we might be needing some relief with the mood looking mixed so far this morning to see the regional benchmark stall near 6-month highs, with stocks in Australia and Japan gaining ground, while the Kospi could snap a 13-day rally, and the Hang Seng is edging lower for a second session. And the Shanghai Composite has opened lower after a 3-day decline. Now, aside from earnings, investors also have Chinese new home price data for March to consider. Otherwise, there is little in the way of heavyweight data that could drive sentiment today ahead of major releases like Chinese GDP numbers due on Wednesday. Now, this morning, we did get the RBA meeting minutes that did indicate there is no near-term case for a move on rates. This ahead of the May policy decision. Also want to mention Rio Tinto, which is rising this morning further above 100 Australian dollars per share as the miner warns of more disruption to iron ore shipments after the drop in first quarter cargoes. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Sophie. Well, we've been bringing you the updates of the trade negotiations between the U.S. and China. There hasn't yet been a major development, but the U.S. has apparently requested the Chinese administration to shift tariffs on key agricultural goods to other products. This is apparently so the Trump administration can sell any eventual trade deal as a win for farmers ahead of the 2020 elections. Joe Sobzik of Bloomberg News brings you this report.
It's certainly a sign of progress that they're negotiating on one of the key sticking points to any deal. The Trump administration wanted to keep tariffs in place on Chinese goods as a means of leverage to ensure China's compliance with the terms of the agreement. By turn, China was not interested in removing its retaliatory tariffs. So now they're discussing where those things would move. And that's critically important for both sides because agriculture agriculture is really a sensitive political issue for both the President Trump and the Chinese government, as it does raise some costs for China, and it does hurt a sector in the U.S. that's very politically sensitive and also very much aligned with President Trump. So the fact that they are at least considering these prospects suggests that there is at least a little bit of movement in the talks, and that they're getting down toward the final details.
Some incremental progress, perhaps, Joe, but what are the risks that still remain here?
Well, one of the risks is certainly that if they are removed from agricultural products and shifted to other U.S. products, there is going to be some ripple effect from that. Other areas that the U.S. exports to China include aircraft, equipment, chemicals, semiconductors. Now, if those categories were to be subject to some new tariffs as part of this deal, that could have some political risk as well for the president. If it causes losses in industrial sectors. And by the same token, there is a risk for President Xi in that they are interested in reaching a deal and have expressed interest in purchasing more U.S. farm goods. But rising prices as a result of tariffs on U.S. imports are politically difficult for the Chinese government, because that raises the cost of, obviously, the cost of living for Chinese citizens. So they have got to manage both of those things, and also some industries that in China, whether or not they're going to continue to take those other imports beyond agriculture.
And not too far away from China, trade talks are continuing, this time between the US and Japan. Both countries are holding the first round of talks based on agreements signed in September last year. While the US says that it is concerned over currency devaluations across Asia and wants a forex clause in the deal, Japan says that such a clause is already in place. Derek Wallbank of Bloomberg News tells you the latest in this report.
It's a little bit confusing, honestly, because there was some further comment that said that this isn't, something that he was a topic for him, but, maybe a topic for somebody else. And so, anyhow, the point of the currency thing, though, is the U.S. is very, very concerned about currency devaluations in Asia. They're concerned about currency moves as a way to sort of gain an edge in trade. This is a thing that the U.S. has been concerned about across multiple economies. And indeed, when the U.S. gets into bilateral negotiations with Japan, as they're starting to, a lot of these areas where the U.S. has sort of had some problems are going to come to the fore. Remember the last time that the U.S. and Japan were in trade talks? It was as part of the multilateral Trans-Pacific Partnership, which the U.S. eventually pulled out of. Now, in a bilateral situation, the U.S. sees a chance to maybe do some real moves on autos, on agriculture, prevent problems with currency. These are some things that the U.S. is going to be targeting going through in these talks.
All right, let's turn to the Indian markets now. Agam Vakil is here to tell you everything that you need to know about the day's trade and also what's happening in the futures and options space. Agam, well, what are the indications before, of course, the midweek holiday, which everyone seems to be not aware of? In fact, our producers didn't know about it.
Right, but you know what, Alex, this is exactly what is going to play. It's going to play an important feature on the market. Because of the holidays, we're expecting the Nifty to move sideways. Because no one wants to take large positions because of uncertainty across the globe. And that's the reason why we're expecting volumes to remain tepid even today as well. Now, we've seen about a 17% up move as far as the SGX Nifty is concerned, but going ahead, we're going to have to wait and watch. There aren't any big earnings either, which could actually drive, and lead to sharp movements in the benchmark indices. Yesterday, we saw about 0.5% gain for the Nifty. The mid-cap and the small-cap indices, again, moving largely in line with the benchmarks. The Nifty Bank and the Nifty PSU Banking Index, giving diverse moves, and marginal losses for the PSU Banking Index, which has actually been strong and has actually outperformed the banking index. But Tata Motors is becoming one of the most interesting stocks to watch over the past 3 or 4 days, and that is because of the strength that the stock has seen. And yesterday, it was a top gainer on the Nifty. It advanced by 7.5% yesterday. Wipro, HDFC Bank, Infosys, of course, among others. We're going to watch out for Wipro. Its earnings will be out today, later on in the day, and the company is also going to take up a buyback. ICICI Bank, Dr. Reddy's, and Vedanta, among others, but not too much movement there. But let's talk about FIIs, and for a change, this time around we've seen FIIs buy as well as DIIs. FIIs to the tune of 713 crores, DIIs to the tune of 581 crores. Moving on to your contributors, it was TCS, of course. It's a sharp up move after the earnings last Friday. HDFC Bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank, Tata Motors, all aiding the benchmarks. And as you can see, a considerable amount of gains coming in from just these 4 stocks out there. On the other hand, what was bearing down on the index was Infosys, which is another heavyweight along with Reliance Industries. But what about the futures and options space? How are things panning out there? 6.5% increase towards longs for Nifty 50 futures. That's up 0.5%. So buying there. And as far as the Nifty banking futures go, another 5% added towards longs. So it does seem like there is some strength which has returned in the markets yesterday, but can this trend sustain today is a real question. As far as the weekly options go as well, largely around 11,600, 11,500. Of course, the weekly options expiry is on Thursday, which leaves just 2 sessions, considering tomorrow is a holiday. And in terms of your change in OI, we're looking at 11,700, both the calls and the puts being written, and the most active strikes as well. Let's move on and talk about your wicks, and that's showing us an interesting move up 2%, and continues to be at the highs of around 21.4. The Nifty put call ratio edging up higher to around 1.6. And among many others, we're keeping an eye on Dewan Housing Finance, IDBI Bank, Jet Airways, which are in the F&O ban, Reliance Power, and Wockhardt as well. And in terms of changes, well, we do have PC Jeweler, which is back into the F&O ban. And DLF, of course, is out of the F&O ban. So we're likely to see a resumption of regular trade for DLF. DCB Bank, Infosys, and Coal India, among others, which are standing out. IGL, keep an eye on that one, along with MGL, of course. A lot of strength seen. And in terms of unwinding, we're keeping an eye on something like an Ujion Financial Services, Ramco Cement, and NBCC. Other than those stocks which are already in the F&O ban, which may see more unwinding coming through, considering it's been in and out for a whole lot of these companies. But we're expecting some consolidation, at least as far as the index is concerned, Alex.
Thanks so much for that, Agam. Well, let's look at what's making headlines across the globe. Sue Keenan of Bloomberg News brings you the first word headlines.
Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers is backing current Fed policy while suggesting the next move will probably be a cut. Speaking at the Peterson Institute in Washington, he agreed the markets are betting that Jay Powell is, quote, considerably more likely to lower rates than raise them. President Trump has argued that the Fed is needlessly restraining U.S. growth at a time of low inflation. Fire has swept through Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, forcing the evacuation of thousands of visitors and local residents, and also causing President Macron to postpone his speech to the nation. The 850-year-old Gothic building had been undergoing renovation at the time fire broke out. Live pictures showed the spire and part of the roof collapse. The Paris Fire Brigade says most of the structure has, however, been saved. The Chinese woman accused of illegally trying to enter President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida has been denied bail. The judge at West Palm Beach said Zhang Zhijing's actions and statements indicate, quote, she was up to something nefarious, unquote, and that she is in extreme flight risk. Zhang has pled not guilty to charges of lying to federal agents and illegally entering a restricted area. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sue Keenan. This is Bloomberg.
The lending consortium with Jet Airways, led by State Bank of India, has decided to withhold the 1,500 crore interim funding that they were supposed to extend as part of the bank-led resolution plan. Now, according to at least 3 people in the know who've spoken to Bloomberg Quit on conditions of anonymity, this decision to withhold that interim funding was taken because bankers are awaiting some kind of clarification from the government regarding any future action by investigative agencies against these bankers. Remember that back in 2017, the Central Bureau of Investigations had arrested many senior officials from IDBI Bank for extending about 900 crore worth of loans to Kingfisher Airlines, which they classified as a fraudulent transaction because the bank did not follow its own credit policies. Now, bankers are afraid that tomorrow, maybe sometime in the future, investigative agencies might raise questions about the lenders extending this 1,500 crore to Jet Airways, and therefore they need some kind of assertion from the government that none of these issues will crop up in the future. Now, lenders have been supporting the airline in the form of giving up some kind of part payments to its employees, as well as paying some urgent fuel bills so that the airline remains functional, so that any bidder that might come in to buy Jet Airways will find some value in the asset. What we also understand from our sources is that bankers have extended the final bid deadline from April 30 to May 10th, which is part of the whole bidding process that SBI initiated on the 8th of April. Now, as part of the bidding process, 6 investors have expressed their initial interest in the airline. These 6 investors include, of course, Etihad Airways PJSC, which is the international partner of Jet Airways and which already owns about 24% equity stake in the airline. Now, once this whole bidding process is completed, the lenders are expecting that one bidder will come forth who will offer the right kind of value to the lenders to buy Jet Airways and then help them turn it around so that it can continue to remain functional as well as pay all of its dues that are pending. Already, lessors have been grounding planes of Jet Airways because they have not been paid whatever were their dues, because of which Jet Airways' fleet has reduced to only 6 planes. Now, this was according to the Civil Aviation Secretary Pradeep Singh Kharolia. Now, what is coming out is that without any functional fleet for Jet Airways and with employees not being paid for months, the airline's operational efficiency as well as the future of the airline itself is at question, and therefore an action from the lenders' end is necessary immediately. Back on the 25th of March, the lenders, as part of the bank-led resolution plan, had decided to extend this 1,500 crore debt support to Jet Airways in exchange for the promoter Naresh Goyal to have pledged his equity stake in the company, as well as Etihad for it to pledge its own equity stake in the company, so that the lenders can extend these funds in a secured manner. However, the lenders have so far not exactly done that. Naresh Goyal, on his part, has already pledged about 26% of his equity stake in to Punjab National Bank, so that the banks can move forward. However, it is not yet clear what Etihad has decided to do, whether it will pledge its equity stake or if it will acquire more stake so that it can take over the airline and run it. But all said and done, Jet Airways is currently facing significant liquidity issues, as well as not being able to pay any of its employees or vendors, which of course leads to the question, how long can Jet Airways survive without interim funding from the bankers?
Well, in a seasonally quiet quarter, we're likely to see Wipro report a 2% rise in its IT services revenue sequentially to a little over $2 billion. And this is according to the Bloomberg poll. But the Bloomberg mean suggests a 0.1% uptick in revenues, as well as EBIT margins, which are expected to remain largely flattish, a 20 basis points contraction to around 18.2% sequentially. And profits could see a decline of 0.8% at around 2,489 crores. Financial services, which has been patchy for the entire industry, is a key watchable here, considering well, it has been relatively volatile for Wipro. Energy, healthcare, and manufacturing verticals are also expected to see mixed performances. Rupee appreciation is the sole reason why we could see a little bit of contraction when it comes to margins. But we are also keeping an eye on the guidance. Now, as far as the previous quarter is concerned, Wipro had guided for 2,047 million to 2,088 million, and it seems that Wipro is likely to report numbers in terms of IT services on the higher end of the revenues guided for the quarter. That said, when it comes to the other aspects, we're also keeping an eye on the buyback because the board will consider it, take it up, and for now, at least Nomura suggests that the buyback will be to the tune of somewhere around 11,900 crores or $1.7 billion to be precise. The company has a lot of cash on its books, so it has reasonable flexibility with that, and the likely buyback could be to the tune of 6.2% of equity. But again, we're watching out for these, so a lot of these details. As far as the quarter is concerned, expecting a stable quarter, no fireworks.
There are a number of stocks we're looking at today, starting with the Q4 results of Tata Metallics. Their revenues were up 8%, 8.7% at 594 crores. Their net profit is up 17.5% at 64.5 crores. EBITDA was down 8.1% at 81 crores, and their margins stand at 13.6% versus 16.1% last year. There was a deferred tax income of 19.5 crore rupees in the current quarter. Then we have Dr. Reddy's. They've received an establishment inspection report from the US FDA for its Hyderabad formulations manufacturing plant. In February, the plant had received 11 observations under Form 483 by the US FDA. The regulatory authority has determined the inspection classification of this facility as voluntary action initiated. InfoEdge invests $60 million in fintech company eTech Cases for 6.25% stake. eTech Cases owns PolicyBazaar.com and PaisaBazaar.com. The company says it post this transaction, companies holding through wholly owned arms will be 7.59%, and via company's subsidiary Make Sense Technologies, it holds around 16.51% in eTech Cases. Prestige Estate Projects arm acquired remaining 51% stake in Babji Realtors for 364 crore rupees. The company says that the target entity is in the business of real estate development, including developing and leasing of shopping malls. Then there's important news on Shriram Transport Finance. The company has received a show cause notice from Directorate of Enforcement in relation to erstwhile Shriram Holdings Private Limited, which was amalgamated with Shriram Transport Finance with effect from April 1st, 2012. Shriram Holdings had relevant approval from foreign equity participation of up to 74%. It had issued warrants to the extent of 243 crore rupees in 2006, which were converted into equity shares within the prescribed limit. The notice alleges that the warrants were issued without relevant approvals. The company is under bona fide view that it has not contravened any of the provisions of the FEMA for which it has been alleged. Lastly, let's have a look at the bulk deals. Brightstar Investments, which is promoted by R.K. Damani, acquired 7 lakh shares of Metropolis Healthcare at rupees 948.39 each. Smaller cap World Fund acquired 6.87 lakh shares of Metropolis Healthcare at 957.67 rupees each.
This is Samsung's new Galaxy Fold. It looks like a regular phone like this, but you can open it up into a full tablet. 7.3-inch screen, about the size of an iPad mini. And the cool thing is you can use 3 applications at once by pinning them together. Where this thing really shines is for watching video. So being able to open a YouTube video, play it, but then also pinning other applications next to it. So here we're watching the video while also interacting on Facebook. You can put Chrome down here if you want while watching the video, so you can do multiple things at once. And that's really what the game-changing thing is here, having a phone that opens up into a tablet in order to get that bigger screen there. And of course, you're able to download all the same apps you can get on Android. So you see WhatsApp is already on here and optimized. There's games as well. The big question here is, are people willing to pay $1,980 for it? This is the 4G model for the US, AT&T, and T-Mobile. It has 6 cameras. You can see it has the cameras on the back, camera on the front, and then 2 here when you open it up on the inside.
Well, it's over $1,900, which amounts to close to 1.4 lakhs, and that's the direct conversion. Of course, those phones would be even more expensive in India, so it might just take a bit out of your wallet. Let's talk about some of the stories that you'll find on the website bloombergquint.com. First up, India's trade deficit widened in March as higher crude prices and rising gold demand increased the burden on the import bill. The gap stood at $10.9 billion, significantly higher than the projections of $9.7 billion that a Bloomberg survey had made. In February, the trade deficit had hit its lowest level in 17 months at $9.6 billion. Now, let's talk about the weather. The India Meteorological Department has said that India is likely to receive a near normal monsoon this year. And that's a projection that will somewhat ease fears. Remember, just a short while back, private weather forecaster SkyMet had projected a below normal rainfall on account of the El Nino effect. The IMD said that while the El Nino conditions do persist as of now, they are likely to weaken as India progresses into the monsoons between July and August. That's all you need to know going into trade today. Do stay tuned, of course. There's a lot more coming up over the course of the day. This is Bloomberg Quint.
What is the meaning of this word suspense? Suspense is something very